He was born in an Iranian family of landowners. They were called Degans. So first he worked in the court of a ruler, and then he was invited to Samanid court by Samanid ruler Mansur. Now, who was this Dagigi? He was a poet. And then you will see a quote from the Fazoli, and he said that though he had a Muslim name, this was not in itself a proof of his religious beliefs. He goes on to say he was more Zoroastrian than a Muslim. So some verses from the Dagigi shows his strong veneration of Zoroastrianism. Scholars believe that he was of Zoroastrian origin. Very likely he was. Interestingly, the Dagigi speaks of 4 most important things he liked: ruby-colored lips, the sound of flute, old red wine, and Zoroastrian creed. Now, if he wasn't a Zoroastrian himself, I don't know who would be. But unfortunately, after completing 1,000 verses, he died. He was killed by his slave. So the Shahnameh got stopped. Then comes Ferdowsi. Ferdowsi was born in 940 Common Era in a village near Tus, near Mashhad in Khorasan. He was also a Degan. So who are Degans? So Degan in those years were member of landed aristocracy, meaning they were landowners. So the Degans were very smart people. They knew that the new invading people would not allow them to survive unless they converted. So they did whatever they had to do. So they converted to Islam. They had to maintain their properties and their lifestyle, etc. But when the revival took place, they saw themselves as repository of Persian and Iranian traditions. They saw it themselves. So at that time, the village near Tus, so that Tus area was controlled by Samanids through a local ruler, Mansur Abu al-Razak. He was a very smart guy. He played off the Samanids and Buids against each other for his own advantage. Somehow he managed to survive. So the revival of indigenous Persian culture provided the milieu for project of Shahnameh, and those were the circumstances where Ferdowsi came into place. Now we know the story, and we will go through the story during the course, but suffice it to say that he was not paid for the sum that he was promised. But he wrote something that lasted much more than the money would have. So the scholars believe that Ferdowsi relied on oral and written sources, not sure of the percentage. He had a huge time to cover from the beginning of this earth. How would you get written and authenticated sources from the beginning of this creation? You cannot. So you had to, of course, do whatever you can to come up with those stories. So the scholars believe that up to Alexander, he relied on oral traditions. Once Alexander comes into picture, he starts relying on written sources. So for pre-Alexander period, he relies on legends, mythologies, oral stories. For introduction of Zoroastrianism under King Ustaz, he used Abu Mansur Dagigi. We talked about Dagigi, who started Shahnameh in the first place, and he was killed. His writings were incorporated by Ferdowsi in his Shahnameh. Some portions were also taken from Shahnameh, and that was compiled under Sasanian King Khusro. So those scriptures, Shahnameh, has a special reason, because those were the scriptures, those were the compilation that was compiled from information that was memorized by Mobids. Why memorized by Mobids? Well, in those years, computers were not discovered. There were no memories that you could store your information. Rewriting was rare. So how do people remember stuff and pass on to the next generation? Well, they found this perfect way of doing it. Assign a certain group of people to memorize all these things, memorize them. That was their storage. That was their CPU. That was their whatever you call it. They stored them in the memory of Mobids. So Mobids were assigned to do that. And then when you have a child, you pass that on to them. And the next generation and the generation after that. So that's what they did. So in the Sasanian times, when reading and writing was a little bit more advanced, they decided that these things need to be written down. Come with technology now. In those days, reading and writing on a paper or whatever was it, advanced technology. And therefore, they wrote it down. Good thing that they wrote it down, because now Shahnameh consists of a part of that, Shahnameh. Then we come to a point where we need to figure out, was Zoroastrian scriptures were used by Ferdowsi. So how do we know? Well, the story of Jamshed that Ferdowsi uses in Shahnameh is narrated in Vanidad. Vanidad was written way before Shahnameh was written. In fact, it could be even before that, because that parallels with the Indian myths and legends, as Jamshed is very closely aligned with Yama, the Hindu lord of underworld. So it is presumed now that maybe these type of legends, etc., were handed down from the Aryana Vayaja place. So what is Aryana Vayaja? Well, Aryana Vayaja was the place that of all the ancestors of the Aryans lived, somewhere in Russia or thereabouts, or northern part of Iran. That's where all the Aryans lived, and then slowly they migrated south. Some went to India, some went to Iran, some went to Europe. So that was the common stock in Aryana Vayaja. So it is believed that Jamshed and those myths were actually started during the time of Aryana Vayaja, when all these people lived as one people, as a group of people, the Aryans. Shahnameh also talks about Saroshezar repeatedly. Saroshezar is Zoroastrian influence. So Saroshezar advises Faridun to imprison Zohar instead of killing him. Saroshezar appears before Chiamak as a magical being. Why as a magical being? Because in Saroshezar's prayers, we call him Shahnameh Tanu Matre. Shahnameh Tanu Matre. He has a body of mantra. So he is not a physical person. He is actually a spirit. He is mantra. He is a prayer. He is also believed to bring custody to King Jamshed. Saroshezar he visits off and on in Shahnameh. Shahnameh also has other ceremonies, Baj, and use of certain plants for preparing drinks, etc., for medical purposes, not drugs. And he also talks about use of mantra as a means of protection. Also, Ferdowsi says, Bagui ke atas parastan budan, parastan e pakistan budan. He says, well, Zoroastrians are not fire worshippers, but they worship Yazdan through fire. So the Shahnameh we have today, is it the final copy? Is it authentic? Likely not. It is believed that the original manuscript of Shahnameh has not survived. The scribes in those years, were prone to error. In those years, again, photocopy machines weren't invented. We couldn't copy and paste on our computers. So in those years, a document needed to be duplicated. There would be scribes who would write them again, copy them from one to the other. While doing that, they were humans. They made mistakes. Scribes also, while they were copying, they saw a word that was pretty old, and they thought that, oh, the new generation may not know this word. They took the liberty of changing that word. Some of them made a notation on the side that I've changed this word. The original word was so and so, but some didn't. So as a result, there are several versions of Shahnameh. Now we saw earlier, how many couplets does Shahnameh have? We said about 50,000. We said about 50,000. Why can't we go and count them? It's not very difficult. Well, which version do you go by? So some versions would have a little addition, because it depends on which scribe wrote them. That's the problem there. Okay. So can we not have a standardized Shahnameh? Can we not have one Shahnameh as authentic and that's it? All the others are gone. Which one would you take as authentic? We don't know. So as a result, there are some versions of Shahnameh, but the overall message survives. It's the same. Yes, there will be a little bit here, a little bit there change, but we know that overall we have the same Shahnameh. The message is the same. So who was Ferdowsi? Well, though a Muslim by birth and likely by practice, amazingly, he ignores Quranic or Muslim cosmology in Shahnameh and uses Zoroastrian and Persian creation myths. He starts the creation of this world, the appearance of the first man or the king, Kayomars, other kings who discovered and established civilization and fought against supernatural forces of evil. He mentioned Saroseza that we saw earlier at several junctions. He considers Johak, the evil, as an Arab. And Ferdowsi ends the Shahnameh with the defeat of Sasanian dynasty and arrival of Islam in Iran. And in his closing verses, he highlights the prophecy of Rustam, the Sasanian commander. What did Rustam say? The Sasanian commander. He says that this is going to bring disaster to Iran and Zoroastrianism. And he was right. Also, Ferdowsi ended his Shahnameh with the defeat of Sasanian dynasty. The legend has it that somebody asked him, why did you stop there? Because he wrote this Shahnameh in several centuries after that. So he is believed to have said that Iran died with that defeat. This Iran is not the Iran of our ancestors. That was Ferdowsi. So Ferdowsi, if you read the Shahnameh, for some reason, he omits the Achaemenid dynasty. No mention of King Cyrus and Darius and Xerxes, the great illustrious Zoroastrian kings, are absent from Shahnameh. Can't find them. Why? Nobody knows. But it is believed that because of some geographical areas that Shahnameh covers changed during time. And maybe at that time, it was thought that was not part of Iran that they covered. In pre-Alexander portion, he mentions other places, Pars, the homeland of the Achaemenids is rarely mentioned, but there are other places. He mentions heavily Balkh and Kabul, Afghanistan, Merv, and the river Oxus, and Hirman. And he puts heavy emphasis on Khorasan up to the advent of a Sasanian Empire. So these scholars divide Shahnameh in two components. One is pre-Alexander, one is post-Alexander. So Alexander, pre-Alexander, they believe that it heavily relies on tribal warfare, and the virtues celebrated in those years were tribal loyalty, military valor, etc. And there is a constant conflict between Iran and Turan. Then comes Alexander. Now, we all know Alexander as Alexander the Great. There is a Hindu spiritual person. He believes that Alexander actually had three names. Alexander, first name. His middle name is the Great. And there is a third name. And the history books have not recorded the third name, maybe because it's too long or whatever. In his opinion, the third name is a fool. He says Alexander was the great fool. Why? He believes that all he did in his life is to kill and kill and kill. For what? To conquer some piece of land? The destruction he brought is immense to the world by his action. So that was the Alexander, and he brought destruction to Iran. He killed all the Moabites in those years. Why? Because they memorized all the kathas, all the scriptures, everything they had memorized, and he wanted to destroy Persian civilization. And that was the library of Persian civilization. And therefore, he found that killing Moabites would be the way to achieve it. Okay, so Alexander. Ferdowsi devotes a significant space in Shahnameh to Alexander. He travels with him all the way to India. What has Alexander to do with Zoroastrianism and Persian civilization? In fact, he was an enemy of Persian civilization, yet he gives a lot of space to him. He also reveals him as a destroyer, yet he portrays him as a seeker of knowledge. Then there are conflicts. During Shahnameh, as you go through the course, you will also see that there are conflicts between kings and their advisors. Kings are usually considered to be more morally inferior to their advisors and champions. So who are the advisors and champions? Rustam is considered to be an advisor and champion. He is more morally superior than the kings that he served, yet he served them nevertheless. So there are three best known legends in Shahnameh: Rustam and Sohrab, Kavas and Shiavoks, and Asfandiar. They are the fathers whose actions brought harm and death to their kids. So as you go through the course, you will find these stories and history very interesting. It talks about Rustam. Perhaps Rustam is the hero of Shahnameh. Ferdowsi devotes a lot of space, lot of resources to Rustam, the most prominent of all the heroes in Shahnameh. He is a warrior without equal, defeating countless enemies. If challenged, he is willing to fight to death. He vanquishes demons dragons and witches. So he also fights the supernatural forces. His mission in life was a sense of duty towards the imperial authority of his country. And unfortunately, as you will see through the Shahnameh, a tragic result of his mortal combat with his son Sohrab, which ended in Sohrab's death. So influence of Aryan Wager. You can see that there is ordeal by fire. Shavuks had to go through an ordeal by fire to prove his innocence. So did Sita in Ramayana. She had to go through the same type of an ordeal by fire. There are parallels with Indian mythology and Zoroastrian mythology, and that can be highlighted through Shahnameh. So as you go through this course, ladies and gentlemen, explore these type of issues and enjoy them, because these are tremendous issues that would give you a better understanding of Shahnameh. So let's see, what was Ferdowsi's mission? What did he set out to do? Did he go out to write history, to record history? Was that his mission, to record history? Was it a history book that he created based on evidence, based on research, supported by special or reliable sources? Was that his mission? Or was his mission to commit to writing oral stories, folklores, and legends? Was that his mission? Or was he designed, or was he set out to write a fictional story? What was he trying to do? Is a question that we have to ask ourselves to understand Shahnameh. So I would suggest that his mission was neither of these three. His mission was to revive the Iranian or Zoroastrian culture. That was his mission. He set out to do that, not to write a historical novel or whatever, not to commit to writing what was orally said. No, his mission was to revive that, to reignite pride in Iranian culture and literature after destruction by the conquerors. Remember, there was 2 centuries of silence. There was an attack on Zoroastrianism. There was an attack on Persian culture. His job was to somehow reverse that, somehow mitigate that, somehow come up with something that would bring people back to respecting and taking pride in their culture. That was his mission. His mission also was to establish the Persian language as a language of sweetness, beauty, and sophistication. Because for those 200 years, people were prevented from using Farsi as their language. They had to use Arabic because of the invaders. It was Ferdowsi's mission to bring them back to Persian, to bring them back to appreciating Persian. That was his mission. Shahnameh was a means to his end. That's how he did it. He didn't set out to write a book of history. He wanted to bring back the Persian civilization. That was Shahnameh. So as you go through this course and as you study Shahnameh, look at it from that angle, that it's not a book of records and history and etc. No, it isn't. And it is so obvious, because to accomplish his mission, he takes liberties, a lot of liberties. He made Rustam the hero of his epic, not because Rustam, maybe he was that powerful and that strong and that smart, but as a human being, he couldn't fight the evil forces. He couldn't go out and destroy devils, etc. No, that's all to bring back that pride. Okay, so if you look at Rustam, he immortalized Rustam in his Shahnameh. He made him larger than life. He made him a protector, Negaban of Iran. He was a protector of Iran. Anyone that was threatening Iran, well, they have to talk to Rustam first, and he will go and destroy them. He portrayed him as brave and loyal. He gave him strength and courage that would elude humans. He gave him supernatural powers to fight against demons and dragons. And to do that, he gave him a special horse, Raksh, the only horse that can carry Rustam. No other horse can carry Rustam. Only horse that can carry Rustam was Raksh. And Rustam was the only person who can control Raksh, a supernatural horse created for what? To bring back that pride. And that horse is described as slaying a lion to protect his master. He would have exaggerated events to provoke Iranian pride, the Persian pride. He also expressed his opinions on certain events. Historians would just write history. That's all their job is. They're not supposed to give you their opinions. Here he did. His heroes, they start their communication with invoking Ahura Mazda, the God, the Lord. He accepts certain outcomes, attributes them to fate, and marvels at God's mysterious ways. He took quite a bit of liberty in writing Shahnameh. So as you go through this course, please keep in mind these liberties that he has taken and given us the Shahnameh. So the question that we have to figure out is, did he accomplish his mission? If his mission was to revive Zoroastrian pride, to bring back Persian pride, to bring back Persian language, did he succeed? An argument can be made that he did. And he proved that pen is not a sword. The conquerors had to come and kill thousands of people to impose their beliefs and their culture, to destroy Persian culture. Whenever there were rebellions, they had to put them down brutally. Then comes Shahnameh and Ferdowsi. Without killing a person, he brought back Persian pride. He brought back whatever that Persian importance. He brought back the Persian language. That was his accomplishment. He did it without killing a person. Whereas the conquerors had to kill thousands of people and create so much destruction. That is his accomplishment. So Ferdowsi's accomplishment, ladies and gentlemen, is what he achieved by writing this Shahnameh. Shahnameh is an important part. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please go ahead.
So was the Shahnameh then, like after it was written, was that a book that a lot of people in that area read often? Was it a very popular book?
Yes, Shahnameh became very popular. It may not have become as popular immediately after that, but nevertheless, it is a popular book even today. So if you see in Iran, people would have Shahnameh sessions, or at least it was a little while ago. And people will act out. There will be a little act of Shahnameh. And then you would have a Rustam and a Sorab, and they would have a certain fight, and just to depict, to tell people this is what happened pictorially. In those years, they didn't have the movies, etc. So they actually have live theater. So yes, and that was very, if you went to Iran, you would have found streets named after Ferdowsi, right? And then Shahnameh is still revered by Persians. Okay, go ahead, Jamshid.
Are there any theories as to why he eliminated Cyrus and the Archimedean dynasty, or was that deliberately taken out of the Shahnameh since he was pro-Zoroastrian?
That's a very good question. Nobody knows why he did it. So the question is, why did he not mention the Achaemenid dynasty, the kings of Cyrus, Darius, and Xerxes? So why did he not mention them? So we don't know the answer to that. It is speculated that there was some, they believed that that Achaemenid period was, it ruled in a certain area, and that area, they did not consider that to be central Iran. Okay, now, how far it's true, I don't know, because they would have, in fact, at that time, those kings ruled a significant portion. In those years, like that was the most spread out kingdom of any kind. Okay, so, but the answer, we don't know. But maybe the next speaker, as we go along, he may have some more thoughts on it.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Anybody else? Yes, Manik, go ahead.
My question is, do you have an opinion on the Kutar brothers' translation of the Shahnameh, where he has the Persian verses on one side of the page and the translation in Gujarati on the right-hand side of the page, Because I have used that, for several years in the past to create another English version from that, and also to convert it from the Gujarati script to the English script, And so the Kutar brothers, did a great job, and I just wanted to know if there's an opinion on that, as far as the accuracy or whatever.
Well, I am not a scholar on Shahnameh, and there are several versions of Shahnameh translation in different languages. So I'm sure, as with any translation, you would have some differences as to how the translator translates it and how they see the message, or how they translate certain words and what meanings do they attribute to those words. So you will have some differences, but I'm sure there are many other translations as well, equally good.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Diana?
Yeah, I was wondering, what are your sources for the for Ferdowsi's history, like what you shared with us? Can you let us know what your sources for that were?
Okay, so I went through a few sources. There are quite a few books. Now, unfortunately, I don't have all the names and the books with me. But there are quite a few sources. Now, the presentation I shared with you is more of an overview, and it doesn't give any authentic translations or historical facts, etc. I think, and quite a bit of it is my way of looking at Shahnameh. How would you? What was his motivation? Well, there are no sources that says, well, why did he write Shahnameh and what was he trying to achieve? It's your interpretation as good as mine. So that would vary from each person. Okay. So as we go along through this course, the next speaker would have more interpretations and the stories, and then they would be able to guide you a bit better for those sources.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so if no further, okay, go ahead, Freddie.
Thanks, Linton. It is very interesting what you just mentioned, a few points. I'm just wondering, then he wrote about Darab, King Darab, and the introduction. And there's so much similarity, in my opinion, between this particular person and probably Cyrus the Great. And some of the things he introduced, like putting in a basket and the basket floated, and he was picked up in the Byzantine Empire and all that. So similar to the story of Moses. I'm just wondering if that was probably done on purpose to bring people like Zoroastrians were kind of boosted out of the people of the book, and this could have caught up, some link between Zoroastrianism and Judaism or something like that. It's just a thought that goes through my mind when you read these stories. There's so much similarity within the story of Moses and, as he says, story of Darab, that to my mind is more like Cyrus. I don't know. That's just my opinion. I'm just wondering if you have any opinion on that.
Yeah, you keep in mind that this is still a pre-Alexander period. And therefore, there's a good possibility that those were written from oral sources that were available. So in the olden times, stories would change. They were not written down. Those were stories given from one generation to the other. So as the next generation come in, they would add a little bit, take away a little bit to meet their understanding of the story and how it relates to that generation. So yes, there is a good possibility that the stories may have changed. It's a good possibility they would have incorporated other stories in it to make their stories more exciting, more relevant, etc. So there's a very good possibility. There are some who believe that the last king, Dara, that was defeated in Shahnameh by Alexander, some believe that Ferdowsi tried to put in the entire Achaemenid dynasty in that particular little segment, that one king was the representation of Achaemenid dynasty. But again, we don't know. We just have to speculate. Okay, go ahead, Hoshan.
Thank you.
Hoshan, go ahead.
Yeah, I unmuted myself. Yeah, as you said about the mission of Ferdowsi for writing the Shahnameh, it was, as you very correctly said, it's very clear, and that was to revive the Persian history and culture and glory. So I have a book with me, like Parsi's Ancient and Modern by F.K. Dadachandji, Faridun K. Dadachandji. He has written many other books also. I'll just show it to you on the screen. And it's the title is Parsi's Ancient and Modern. It was written in 1989. He's a very established author. He's written other books also. And then right at the very start, he's dedicated the whole book, as you can see. He's written on top, dedicated with deep gratitude to the pious memory of Ferdowsi, and that's his picture, who revived the name, fame, and glory of the Parsis through his immortal Shahnameh. And further, he has quoted a verse in Farsi from Ferdowsi himself. Ferdowsi has written in Persian, Base ranj bardam dari salsi, ajam zinda kardam Haddin Parsi. Haddin Parsi. English translation is, I have toiled and drudged for 30 years, 30 long years, and have revived the glories of old Persia with my poetry. So that's written at the bottom over here. So it was very clear that what Ferdowsi's mission was, and that was to revive the Persian glory and history. It's a fact that I think apart from the Achaemenid dynasty, whatever history we know, our Zoroastrian history, it's due to Ferdowsi, and we must be very grateful to him for that.
Absolutely correct. And I second your opinion. Okay, thank you. So Friyan, go ahead, Friyan.
Hi. I was just thinking, like, if Ferdowsi was venerating Zoroastrianism in a time where there is just Islam out there, how would the ruler take to that? I mean, he's not gonna like it.
Well, that's a very good point. Ferdowsi was brave, but he was also smart. he knew his limits. He did things to the limit, and then when he knew that he couldn't exceed a certain point, he restrained himself. So you would see passages, etc., and as you go through the course, you will come across those where he says things in a certain way, implying certain things without mentioning certain words. Okay, so he has done the best he could. I'm sure he would have certain pressures as well to not to offend certain part of his audience, particularly the more powerful, because he would have known that if he did that, the consequences would be dire. So, but the beauty of Shahnameh and his writing style is that he says things in a certain way and communicates it so well without mentioning things that he doesn't or he couldn't mention. So you're right. I think he would have restricted himself considerably on that point. Okay, so now, okay, Bhujwala, go ahead.
Yeah.
Last question, and then we have some
Just
quiz.
comment that wouldn't some credit go to the king, is that Mahmud Ghazni or something, that he assigned a project of writing a Shahnameh, and offering the prize of 30,000 gold coins or something like that. So some credit would go to that king also, right?
Certainly, certain credit goes to the king, but the king wasn't a saint, right? After promising him golden coins, he sends him silver coins.
Silver coin, right?
Yes, and towards the end, Ferdowsi is not kind to him.
Right.
He talks about his mother being not noble, etc., etc. So we don't want to go into that. But and then look at the life that he led. So certainly, a certain credit definitely goes to him for initiating this project. But perhaps he could have done better, and we would have remembered him in better terms than a person who broke his promise.
Right.
Thank you. Hushan, go ahead.
Yeah, just to continue, add to that, Mahmud Ghazni did intend to give the gold coins per couplet, 1 gold coin per couplet as promised. But what we read in history books is that he was, the courtiers, in his court, the courtiers were very jealous of Ferdowsi, and they misled him and poisoned the king, and they misled him. Okay, why are you giving him gold coins? It's too much for him. Rather pay him in silver or bronze. And it was the courtiers who actually misled the king. Otherwise, he had all the intention of giving him the gold coins. So yeah, I would agree with our previous speaker that credit should be given to Mahmud Ghazni also for patronizing this work. Yes.
Certainly credit goes to him, but he was the king. Those were the advisors.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Right? When things go well, they take all the credit.
Yeah.
So when things go wrong, they should take the blame. But anyway, certainly the credit is due, and let's pay that due credit to the king as well.
True.
Okay, so now it's our quiz time. Okay, so how long ago, if anyone can answer this, how long ago was Shahnameh written? How long ago was Shahnameh written?
Exactly. Can I say it?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, exactly around 1,000 years ago.
About 1,000 years ago, that's correct. It was written sometime in 1010 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So, yes. So it's believed that the Zoroastrians left Iran for India sometime in 700 and something, maybe early part of 800 Common Era, and then he wrote in about 1,000. Okay, so why is he called Ferdowsi Tusi? That's not his right name.
Yeah.
Why was he called Ferdowsi Tusi?
He was
Any
born
thoughts?
in Tus. Yeah.
Born in Tusi.
Yes, he was from a place called Tus,
Yes.
right? So yeah, they associated his name with his place of residence or place of birth. So Ferdowsi Tusi is not his right name, but he is known as such. So what was his family? What kind of a family did he come from?
Deccan.
Deccan, that's right. So what does that mean? What does Deccan mean?
They were farmers.
Landowner.
Landowners. They were landowners. And how adaptive were they? How versatile were they?
They
Very
gave up their
versatile.
so that
Very versatile. Well, in what sense?
In
gave
that
up,
they pretended to be Islamic, but then they were actually Zoroastrians at heart. And I had read something, I don't know if I'm quoting it correctly, that actually when Ferdowsi was born, his father or his uncle said that this is a man who's going to be a great man someday.
Yeah.
And that Ferdowsi, even as a child, would write poetry and poems. And that actually, I think his uncle or somebody had some of this information stored away and hidden. And he gave it, maybe it's the Kiki's information, I don't know, but then he gave it to Ferdowsi and that Ferdowsi wrote it out.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the truth, but I do remember reading something of that sort.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's
I
very
read something.
possible.
Yeah.
Do you?
That's very possible
Yeah.
because he also had other sources as we explored from
Yeah.
Khudainameh and from the Gigi, who started to write Shahnameh in the first place. So, and he does give credit to these sources in his writing. So he doesn't just copy it and not give credit. He does give credit to these authors.
Yeah.
So
Also-
how is Shahnameh different than other epics? How is it different?
It's different because it covers a huge period of over 1,000 years, and not just one person or one event. It covers an entire Zoroastrian history.
Yes, you're right. So Shahnameh covers a huge period of time from the beginning of this earth, from the beginning of creation till the end of Sasanian times, whereas the other epics are restricted to a certain generation, certain group of people, etc. Okay. The sources of Shahnameh. How did he get his sources? Where did he get his source material from? Pre-Alexander and post-Alexander. Where did he get his material from?
Well, pre-Alexander was the oral sources, and after Alexander, some written sources.
Correct, correct. So pre-Alexander, it's believed, now it may not be true exactly, but it's believed that before that, it was all oral legends, folklore, etc. And after Alexander, there were more written sources available because writing was in fashion, in style at that time. Okay. So what other writings did he rely on? So we talked about the Gigi, Khudainameh, and Zoroastrian scriptures. Okay. So which major dynasty is absent from Shahnameh? Achaemenid dynasty is absent from Shahnameh.
And also,
And how was Alexander portrayed in Shahnameh?
As a
With
destroyer.
As a destroyer and also seeker of knowledge.
Not, oh, okay.
He gave both to Alexander. He showed his destroying part. And then he also goes on to say that he was seeker of knowledge. He looked for things and he shows him as a good person and a bad person. Okay. Who would you call a hero in Shahnameh?
Rustam.
Rustam is the hero in Shahnameh. Okay. What was Ferdowsi's mission? What was Ferdowsi's mission?
To
Glorify.
revive Persian culture and pride.
Yes, to revive and glorify Persian culture. That was his mission. And how did he accomplish it?
By
He made
writing
use
the
of
By writing the Shahnameh.
Shahnameh.
The one
And
that-
also
yeah.
in pure Persian, to revive the Persian language, because otherwise the Arabic language was dominant at the time. So.
Right. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining. And-
Tempted uncle, is it
Go ahead, Jamshed.
coincidental that he gave so much praise to Alexander and he eliminated the Archimedean dynasty because Alexander essentially destroyed the Archimedean dynasty, so he had some bias against them for some reason?
That's possible. But if I were to write about revival of Persian culture, why would I give so much space to someone who was meant to destroy it? Why would I give him so much space to someone who has nothing to do with Persian civilization? Why would I travel with him to all sorts of places which are not even Persian? I don't know what the answer is.
Maybe he didn't know about them.
People didn't know about, well,
No.
maybe,
they-
but
I mean,
people
there are
didn't
years
know
and
about
years
Cyrus
that
and
elapsed.
Darius.
Yeah,
No.
maybe there are years and years that elapsed and people were actually too busy finding for even a bite of food to eat. They weren't going to mountains to look at the writings of Darius or read the Cyrus cylinder. They were just trying to survive, and people forgot about the Archimedes.
That's very possible. Unfortunately, we can't read Ferdowsi's mind now.
No.
But whatever it is, I think the fact remains that he didn't mention them.
Yeah, and also they were losers in a way, in his mind, right? Because they lost everything to this one guy. He won.
Yeah, that could be.
Mhm.
That very could be, but we don't know. So last question to Hoshan.
Yeah, just continuing with Maruk's question. It's not possible that he did not have information about the Achaemenid kings because he had all the information about Alexander. And that
That's true.
was just that same period. But we'll come to know, I think, the exact purpose later on in classes. And Maruk was right when she said that somebody predicted when Ferdowsi was a child that this child would get world fame. I also recall reading about that. So it was predicted that he would get world famous by someone.
Well, whoever predicted that would have been a very wise man.
Yeah, but it is there. I read it. Yeah, that's right.
Very rich. If it was today, it would be very rich man.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much. We are just about time. So thank you so much. Just keep in mind that the future classes are on Sundays at 11 Eastern time. So look forward to seeing you all at that time. Thank you so much.
Are we going to use the same Zoom link